James Franklin. This guy might be the poster child for almost but not quite. At Penn State, Franklin's got everything you could want. Great facilities, passionate fan base, solid recruiting classes. But man, when it comes to those games that actually matter, it's like watching someone choke on their own potential. The two recent games against Oregon and the Ohio State Troubles are a clear pattern. Look at his record against top 10 teams. We're talking about a guy who's 4-20 against ranked opponents as the underdog. That's not just bad luck, that's a pattern. The 2016 season probably haunts Penn State fans the most. They beat Ohio State in a thriller, won the Big Ten championship, but somehow Ohio State got the playoff spot because Franklin couldn't handle Michigan and Pittsburgh earlier that year. Then there's the 2017 season where they started 7-0, climbed to number 2 in the country, and struggled to finish in their big games against Michigan State and Ohio State, losing both close games. Classic Franklin. Build you up just to let you down when it counts. Mark Richt. Here's a guy who perfected the art of the moral victory. At Georgia, Richt was the king of "we played them close," and moral victories don't count in the win column. For 15 years, Georgia fans watched this man come so close to breaking through, only to stumble right at the finish line. The numbers tell the whole story. Richt went 9-5 against Florida, which sounds decent until you realize Georgia was supposed to be the better program for most of those years. Against Alabama, forget about it. He was 0-6 against Nick Saban, and most of those games weren't even competitive. But the real kicker was his bowl game record. This dude went 9-5 in bowl games, which again sounds okay until you dig deeper. In BCS bowls and major games, he was getting absolutely worked. The 2012 SEC championship against Alabama was peak Richt. Georgia led at halftime and failed to finish, losing to Alabama by 4. When he moved to Miami, you'd think a change of scenery might help. Nope, same old Mark Richt, just in a different uniform. The guy went 26-13 at Miami, which looks respectable, but he never beat a single-ranked team on the road. Do me a favor and subscribe if you want more college football breakdowns like this. We're posting weekly college football videos you don't want to miss. Lincoln Riley. Here's a guy who might be the most frustrating coach on this list because he's so close to being elite, but keeps finding new ways to disappoint when it matters most. At Oklahoma, Riley had everything going for him. Elite quarterbacks, explosive offenses, and a program that was basically built to win Big 12 titles. But here's the thing about Riley. He's 0-4 in college football playoff games. His Oklahoma teams would put up video game numbers all season long, then get to the playoff and look completely overwhelmed. The 2018 loss to Alabama was particularly brutal. Oklahoma got steamrolled, going down 28-0 early and eventually losing 45-34. That's not just bad luck. That's poor management when the lights are brightest. Then he bolted to USC with all that fanfare and that massive contract, and what's happened? The Trojans have looked good at times, sure, but they're still finding ways to lose games they shouldn't. The 2022 season was classic Riley. They went 11-3 and won the Pac-12, but got absolutely embarrassed by Tulane in a bowl game. A team that hadn't been relevant in decades just took down a blue blood school with top recruits in a big-time bowl game. Brian Kelly. This dude spent 12 years at Notre Dame building what looked like a championship-caliber program, only to consistently come up short when the stakes were highest. Kelly's Notre Dame teams made the playoff twice and got outscored 64-20 in those two games combined. That's not competitive, that's embarrassing. The guy went 113-40 at Notre Dame, which sounds impressive until you realize he never won a single major bowl game. Not one. His teams would cruise through the regular season, maybe lose one game to a decent opponent, then get to January and look like they didn't belong on the same field as elite competition. Now he's at LSU with all that SEC money and resources, and what's he done? Gone 29-11 in the first 3 full seasons with little in the way of signature wins to show for it. Though bringing in Jaden Daniels for his Heisman season was a big snag. The 2023 season was particularly telling, LSU having the star quarterback in Daniels during that Heisman season, but coming away with a 10-3 record, losing to Florida State, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Same old Brian Kelly, just in a different uniform. Mike Gundy. Probably the most beloved underachiever in college football, and I mean that with genuine respect. Gundy's attempt to build something special at Oklahoma State had a fun run. He turned a program that was basically irrelevant into a somewhat consistent Big 12 contender. The guy's won 10-plus games 6 times and has taken the Cowboys to a couple Big 12 championship games. But here's where it gets frustrating for Oklahoma State fans. Gundy failed in their 2 Big 12 championship game appearances. 2 chances to win the conference, 2 losses. The 2011 season was probably their best shot. They went 12-1 in the regular season, were ranked number 3 in the country, then lost to Iowa State in double overtime in a game that basically cost them a shot at the national title. And don't even get me started on his bowl record against elite competition. When Oklahoma State faces top-tier opponents in big games, they tend to come up short. Granted, bowl games mean a lot less these days with all the opt-outs. But it's like Gundy can get his teams to the dance, but once they're there, they forget how to play the music. Bill Snyder. Now this one's tricky because what Snyder did at Kansas State was legitimately miraculous. The man took a program that was historically the worst in college football and turned them into a legitimate contender, twice. His first run from 1989 to 2005 was one of the greatest coaching jobs in sports history. But here's the thing about Snyder. For all the success he had, he never quite got them to that elusive championship level. Kansas State made it to 4 Big 12 championship games under Snyder and did win 2 of them, so I am not going to discount there was successful seasons. The 1998 season still haunts Kansas State fans. They were 11-0 and ranked number 1 in the country, but lost to Texas A&M in the Big 12 championship game. That was their shot at a national title, and they couldn't finish. Even in his second stint from 2009 to 2018, Snyder built some really good teams, but could never quite get them over the finish line in the biggest moments. Frank Beamer. Virginia Tech's longest tenured coach and a guy who absolutely transformed that program into something special. Beamer took the Hokies from obscurity to consistent national relevance, and his defenses were legendary. The guy won 238 games and made Virginia Tech a household name in college football. But when you look at his record in the biggest games, it's pretty sobering. Beamer was winless in 5 BCS bowl games, including that heartbreaking loss to Florida State in the 2000 Sugar Bowl that cost them a shot at the national title. His teams would dominate the regular season, get to January, and consistently come up short against elite competition. The Michael Vick era was probably their best chance. That 1999 team was absolutely electric and had all the pieces to win it all. But they couldn't get past Florida State when it mattered most. That's been the story of Beamer's career. Great regular seasons, disappointing finishes when the stakes were highest. Gary Patterson. TCU's defensive mastermind who turned the Horned Frogs into a legitimate national power. Patterson's defenses were consistently among the best in the country, and he managed to elevate TCU from a mid-major program to Big 12 relevance. But Patterson's teams had a habit of coming up just short in the biggest moments. They went undefeated in 2010 and got stuck in the Rose Bowl instead of playing for a national title. When they got left out of the college football playoff in 2014, they demolished Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl 42-3. His later years at TCU were particularly frustrating. The program started to slide, and Patterson couldn't seem to recapture that magic from the early 2000s. By the time he was let go in 2021, TCU had become mediocre again, and Patterson's inability to adapt to the changing landscape of college football had become pretty apparent. Chris Petersen. Petersen might be the most underrated coach on this entire list, and that's exactly the problem. Petersen built Boise State into a giant killer that had no business competing with the big boys, then somehow made them do exactly that. The Fiesta Bowl upset over Oklahoma in 2007 was pure coaching brilliance. That Statue of Liberty play call is still giving Oklahoma fans nightmares. But here's where it gets frustrating with Petersen. He had multiple chances to take that next step and never quite got there. At Boise State, his teams went 92-12 over 8 seasons, which is absolutely insane. They beat Oregon, they beat Georgia, they consistently punched above their weight class. Yet somehow, they never quite broke through to that elite level where they could compete for actual national titles, which is understandable at a place like Boise State. When he moved to Washington, you figured this was his shot to prove he could do it at a major program with real resources. And honestly, he did pretty well. Took the Huskies to the college football playoff in 2016, won the Pac-12 twice. But that playoff game against Alabama was brutal to watch. Washington got boat raced 24-7, and it wasn't even that close. His team looked completely overwhelmed on the biggest stage. The really frustrating part about Peterson is that he seemed to burn out right when Washington was hitting their stride. The guy just up and retired in 2019 at age 55, right when he had the program positioned to maybe make another playoff run. It's like he got tired of always being the bridesmaid and never the bride. Jim Harbaugh. Okay, this one's complicated because Harbaugh literally just won a national championship at Michigan a few years ago, so you can't say he never got over the hump. But man, the journey to get there was absolutely brutal for Michigan fans, and honestly, it almost didn't happen. For the first 6 years of his Michigan tenure, Harbaugh was the king of almost but not quite. The guy went winless against Ohio State from 2015 to 2020. Against a rival that Michigan fans had been waiting decades to beat consistently. Those weren't even competitive losses most of the time. We're talking about getting outplayed, outcoached, and embarrassed on the biggest stage in college football. His bowl record was equally frustrating. Harbaugh went 1-5 in bowl games before that championship run, including losses to South Carolina and Florida that had Michigan fans questioning whether he was really the answer. The 2018 season was peak frustrating Harbaugh. Michigan went 10-3, looked great all year, then got absolutely demolished by Ohio State 62-39 in a game that wasn't even competitive. What makes Harbaugh's story so interesting is that he finally figured it out in 2023. But it took a complete philosophical change. He had to swallow his pride, hire new coordinators, and completely overhaul his approach to the rivalry game. The fact that he won it all in the end doesn't erase those 6 years of disappointment. It just makes them even more frustrating in hindsight because you know the talent was always there. Even now, with that national title in his back pocket, Harbaugh's legacy at Michigan is complicated. He saved the program from irrelevance, sure, but it took him way longer than it should have to beat the teams he was supposed to beat. That championship run was incredible, but it came after years of Michigan fans wondering if he'd ever get there. And now Michigan has been stuck with battling the college football authorities over that very championship season that seemed to give Harbaugh the closure he was seeking. With these coaches in the big games, there was always a little doubt that creeped in as a fan. You know that sinking feeling when your team's up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and somehow you just know they're about to blow it? Yeah, that's what it feels like being a fan of these coaches. That's the brutal reality of college football. Some coaches can build programs and win games, but when everything's on the line, they just can't close the deal. Hit that subscribe button if you want more deep dives into college football's biggest what-ifs and disappointments.